Episode, I got a kick-ass guest from Duke University, Jeremy Garcia, on joining me to talk, shoot the shit. And so, as always, we kick it off. Bro, give me the wildest, give me the funniest, craziest story. It could be from coaching, it could be from playing, Pee Wee days. What you got?
Yeah, this is more, I think, embarrassing than funny. So we'll see how I feel after I share it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I grew up fortunate enough to be around college athletics. And early on, I fell in love with the pep band, the marching band.
Yeah.
And that was, I would go to games just, I want to go see them. I want to see them perform. I want to see them on the field at football games. Um, so much so that I then began to carry around a white plastic hanger pretending it was a tuba. So wherever I went, I had a white plastic hanger. And then once I got old enough, I was able to carry, I was physically strong enough to carry a trumpet.
Right.
And so that just became, that was my shtick from like age 2 to probably later than I want to admit. But I always had,
Last year.
exactly right, exactly. Started with the hanger and then I just carry the trumpet everywhere. Whenever I go back to Texas or go back to sporting events, it's like, hey, it's you used to carry that trumpet around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Yep, that
yeah.
was me. Like
Please forget. Please forget.
yeah,
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
run from it now. But it's yeah, that's the first thing I thought of because it came up in a conversation a couple of days ago and I hadn't thought about that or like told that story in a really long time because people tell it to me all the time.
Right,
They
right. Remind
how
you.
exactly. But that's going to be something that I think sticks with me for at least
Yeah.
as long as the people that remember it are around back home. But
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. Let's dive in, man. So you said you grew up around college athletics all the time. Was that from just family, parents, coaching? How'd that come about?
yeah, so my mom retired a few years ago as an assistant AD at Texas, the University of
Ah,
Texas. She worked there for 31 years when she called it, and so we were fortunate enough to go to everything from swimming and diving championships to volleyball Final Fours, basketball Final Fours. We were at the '05 national championship football game against USC.
yeah,
And so like that was kind of that still is really our lifeblood. Both my parents went to Texas and then my mom got into athletics there right after graduation. So that was the upbringing. And it's one of the most unique and fortunate experiences I think a kid can have. Me and my sister were raised in it and it's still, my sister's back in Austin now with my parents and they still go to sporting events and it's still just like a part of their routine.
yeah,
Obviously I'm in it now, like I'm working just in a different part of the country. But I think that's whenever I meet administrators or other coaches that have kids or are raising kids in it, I say, I think I turned out okay. Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's such a cool, there's cool stories to tell. There's cool experiences to talk about. And it's unlike any other upbringing, I feel like. And so
Yeah.
it's been in my blood. It was in my mom's blood to just be in college athletics in some capacity. And I was fortunate enough to fall in love with the coaching side of things.
Yeah. So did you know kind of early on that like was college always a little bit of a desire for you from just being in that world?
It was. I didn't know what that meant necessarily. I don't know if it was
Right.
going to be as an athletic trainer, administrator, or coach. But I knew that like growing up in that world, I was like, this is what I want. I want to be in this environment for as long as I possibly can. And I've been very fortunate to get very, very lucky with the stops I've had and the experiences I've been given. So fell in love with coaching and that was, put my head down and was like, all right, let's figure this thing out. I don't know what it's going to look
Yeah.
like. Let's see what we can do.
So how volleyball?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my mom played club at Texas,
Okay.
and fell in love with the community of it. She played until she was probably 35. And she was fortunate enough that once she got into administration at Texas, that was one of the sports that she ran, or she was an event manager for volleyball. So that was the sport I got to travel with the most. It was the coaching staff that we were the closest to. Uh,
Yeah.
and so then it just became, I was at home matches 4 hours before first serve for no reason other than
Right.
it was
Yeah.
a chance to get a
With
ball
a
and hit
tuba.
against the wall. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No kidding. But a chance to hit a ball against the wall and see if anybody wanted to play. And it just became the love. Like it was every chance I got, it was like, can I find a gym, find a wall, find a net? And then was fortunate enough to play and then help out in college and then obviously end up where I'm fortunate enough to end up. But volleyball, yeah, why volleyball? I think it was early exposure and my mom had a love for it, so that was probably had an impact. A lot of her friends are from her volleyball days, uh,
Right.
so it was just easy. It fell into my lap, is what it feels like.
So you did play as well, or was it just diving in full nose as like student of the game, so to speak?
Yeah, so I got to play growing up. Austin Juniors is a really big club on the girls' side back home in Austin, Texas. But I was on the first ever boys team back in 2011, and
Wow.
played for
Yeah.
7 years. Had some opportunities to play in college, but I think when you think about playing in college or playing college sports, it doesn't necessarily always line up with the experience that you want, right?
But
And
that's
so
the $1 million question. I
that's the
mean,
million
you're
dollar
in that
question.
world is like, is even all the athletes that I'm around on a day-to-day basis is like, they're trying to navigate the waters. I kind of stole this from my wife a little bit, who was a college coach as well, of like, it just boils down to like, what experience do you want to have? And there's no right or wrong answer. And
Right.
it's getting them to, I think, be honest, like with that answer.
Yeah, and I it was hard because it meant I was not going to play at least competitively or
Right.
in the same way. But because of my mom's career and our relationships with that department, the coaching staff at Texas was like, "Come work, be a manager. You're going to come to undergrad here anyway, so like might as well make the most of it." And uh, that's I think kind of feels dramatic to say, but like that experience changed my life. Like it expedited every career path that I could have imagined for myself. So I was still around the game. I got to play and practice a little bit, right? I got
Yeah.
to travel. I got to learn what it looks like at that level. And the story I like to tell is I was about 2 weeks into the job my freshman year, and I was like, this is it. Like I don't know how
Yeah.
I'm going to get back here, but like at this level with this level of resources, this level of commitment, this level of excellence, like this is the end goal. How do I do everything I can to get to that point? And so I was 18 at the time, and kind of haven't looked back.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So I guess fast forwarding a little bit to like where you are now, and this is we were touching on this kind of like before the show a little bit, but obviously like the world of college athletics is, I think we call it, was the wild wild west, or it is the wild wild west. It's crazy, crazy, crazy as hell, is from, I think, from an athletics standpoint and a coaching standpoint, because there's coaching changes all the time, and now they have the portal, and it's just crazy, crazy, crazy. So how have you been able to kind of like navigate that and be able to keep a love for, being in that world? Because it is wild and crazy. And there is a certain amount of uncertainty too that you have to know going in and be able to deal with, and know that like tomorrow I could be at a new school in a new city, right? Like
yeah.
how have you been able to like kind of navigate that?
Yeah, it comes with its fair share of anxiety, right?
Yeah.
You just don't know. Like you have
Yeah.
no idea. A kid might want to quit tomorrow, or you might get fired. Like there's all these different aspects. Um, but I think trying to like you stay grounded by remembering why you're in it. And I've been extremely fortunate to be around people who I think are in it for the right reasons. And it's part of it is to win. You want to win at a high level. But at the end of the day, it's about the relationships that you build. And I think if you can walk in the door every day and know that you're surrounded by people who are in it for that reason too, it gets you through the hard days and through the anxiety of it. Because we will be the first ones to admit that it's hard and it's scary. But we're surrounded by people who we think are in it for the right reasons. And I did not understand, I don't think, the scope of that, like to the magnitude that you have to, I don't know, convince yourself,
Yeah.
until I got to Duke, because this place, it's about the people. And we work really hard to make sure that we remember that every day, because you know resources are crazy at other schools in our league, and trying to maintain what that looks like. But it's about, foundationally, we're about the experience and the people that we're surrounded by. And so I think if you can keep reminding yourself of that, it makes the anxiety and the roller coaster of the career, of the profession, a little bit easier to maintain. Not easy, but a little bit easier to get through. And so I think, at the end of the day, if you lose that, if you lose touch with that, it's going to be really hard to enjoy what you do, or to frankly even be good at it.
Yeah.
Because you have to remind yourself of that on a daily basis, of why you're in it. You're in it for the people that you're surrounded by. You're in it for the people that you will be surrounded by tomorrow and the next day and the next year.
Mhm.
And so I think staying in that frame of mind is what allows us to kind of keep going.
So has that why, so to speak, passion, purpose, whatever word you want to like plug into there, has that developed and grown over the years? Like for you, from like when you first got in it, from being a GA or, just kind of like whatever the role was when you got to school at Texas versus now where you are at Duke, has that kind of grown and developed over the years for you?
It has, because I think initially there was the glitz and glamour of
Yeah.
being at Texas volleyball, right? I mean, they last night they punched their ticket to the Final Four, and they've been to 17 of the last 18 Elite Eights. Like it's they're a different world, right? I think they're on a
Right.
different scale. And so as my experiences progressed, it was very much like, what else is there to love about this?
Mm,
It's not all going to be that. Like that's the top 1%.
yeah.
So what else do I love about this experience? And it's the people. And I think as the different stops that I've had, whether it be at the college level or at the club level, it's been about, who am I surrounded by on a daily basis? Yeah, let's go win some matches. Let's go be the best that we can be. Let's go train at a high level. But it's unrealistic to expect that to be the case every single day, right?
Mm,
What can be the case every single day is that you enjoy you enjoy being around the people that you're around. And so I think as I've progressed, and as the job gets harder because I'm getting more responsibility, and now I'm an assistant coach, and it's different than being a manager or a volunteer or anything like that. It's like feeling out that pressure, feeling out that stress, but still knowing that I need to then prioritize the people that I'm around even more.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the foundation.
Yeah. So what's been kind of your path and journey that's led you up to this point? Obviously, I guess more or less like, how have your roles evolved from when you first got in at Texas to like where you are now?
Yeah, I think where I'm at now is where I wanted to be those first 2 weeks at Texas. It was like, it's like,
Yeah.
how can I be a Power Five assistant? Like that's,
Right.
and again, like whether or not that's the right or wrong way to look at it, I think that was the goal for me. And so I don't know, day one was shagging balls and playing in practice and learning how to use their statistical program, but kind of just being behind the scenes, not doing
Hmm.
a whole lot. And then that role increased. I was then full-time stats, traveling with the team, and being responsible for reports and information and being asked my opinion on things. And so then it was like, okay, this is, inching my way towards what this industry or what this job might look like, or what I want this job to be. And
Was
then
it hard to speak up at that time?
very, yeah.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, man, because the staff and I had known each other for so long because of my mom's
Right.
job. Right. And so there was the weird dynamic of like, we're all comfortable around each other, but I'm still a manager, but it's
Yeah.
like, I might have some opinions. So how do I present that well, like as the manager, not as their family friend?
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
so that was, yeah, it was an interesting dynamic kind of progressing through that. But it was about comfortability. And I'll tell you this, there's a student now at Texas who's essentially in the same role that I was. And he and I touch base as frequently as we can. And he and I had that exact conversation the other day about speaking
Funny.
up.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, you're gonna the reality is you're gonna have to feel stupid at some point. Like you're
Right.
gonna say something and it's gonna be wrong or it's gonna feel silly. But like until you like jump over that hurdle, you're never gonna speak up. And if you want a voice, if you want them to hear you and respect what you have to say, you got to say something, right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
first step. And so yeah, so then that role progressed, and then I was fortunate to go to Penn State, another historic volleyball program, and be their volunteer assistant. And I think that's where I really found my voice. Coach Rose allowed us as a staff to be vocal and to speak our mind about things that we saw to the girls as a staff. And I learned what it meant to not necessarily run practice because he ran practice, but like have a voice in the gym.
Hmm.
And whether I was right or wrong, and he would let us know. Like we would have feedback, and it was productive. And I think that's where the voice, where I found my voice, and allowed me to be in a spot where I'm at now, where I'm comfortable in a gym. I'm comfortable talking to my boss. I'm comfortable talking to administration, to donors, because again, you have to speak up at some point, right?
Right.
Okay, with the like I might be wrong, and dude, I'm wrong a lot still.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I
Of course, we all
not
are.
always,
Yeah.
yeah, not always saying the right thing, but I think this profession, or at least for me, has been about what does finding your voice look like? And I think you have to use it at some point to find it. right? It's not just going to kind of appear out of nowhere. And so that's been, I think, the biggest progression as the roles have changed, as the titles have changed, the responsibilities have changed. It's about finding my voice and what that looks like for me. And as a coach, you know, how loud do I want to be? How active do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
But finding the comfort level for myself to where I don't want to not be myself. Like, I have to be myself in the gym, in the office.
100%. Yeah.
And what does that look like? And so I think it's a never ending process, but feeling really good about where I'm at now because of the experiences I've had, the freedoms I was given in those first few responsibilities, those first few roles.
Yeah. It's funny is I always think back like as like I've worked one-on-one with coaches and they're trying to figure out kind of that even the roles that they're in of how can they continue to grow and progress. And so the number one question I always give them, and it's where I started, and it's kind of the freedom to just point blank say that you're dumb and ignorant a little bit, because once you can get around people that are, I call it like playing the game, whatever the game is,
Yeah.
game of life, game of business, game of whatever it is, higher than you is, I always just ask them, like, what do I perceive to be true that isn't? Because there's a reason you're ahead of me and you watch me and notice me that I have all these beliefs that it's just like, man, when he figures that out, it's just like, just go ahead and tell me. Just go ahead and tell me what I believe is wrong. Yeah, like straight up. So yeah, find it fascinating. I like just go ahead and lay the cards on the table. Just tell me where I'm an idiot. Just point blank, just show me, point.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's been, because I know you said a minute ago that you've worked some with club as well. So what's been kind of that different dynamic of working with the college age and level of athletics versus younger, and just it's just a different level of athletics?
It's so different, man. And I think the timing of it for me was one of the most important parts, because my biggest exposure, my biggest roles in the club scene were when I was at Texas, right? So at Texas, trying to find my voice and like figuring out what that was. And then in the club scene, it was like, hey, you're running this team.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Like this is new territory for me. But
are you sure you want me to do this?
Right. Like, I'm 19 years old. Like, I don't know how you want this to go. But I think that environment, because the stress and the pressure of at that point being at Texas was so high, right? Like the expectation was we were supposed to win the national championship every single year, right? And at the club scene, that was part of the goal, was to compete for that. But these kids were 15 years old, man. And so it was like, it allowed me to be exposed to a different kind of love for the game. These kids showed up because they wanted to be with their friends and they wanted to train at a high level. They wanted to be elite athletes, but they wanted to be around people that weren't necessarily their classmates. You know, it gave them a chance to play a sport that they loved by being around people that they wanted to be around as much as they could. And so the timing could not have been better, I think, for me, because it was refreshing. It was finding that balance between the high stakes of being at Texas and what that means versus being with 15, 16-year-olds, and they're finding out what it means to love volleyball, and they're going through the recruiting process and they're asking questions about things. And it's like, I don't know the answer, but let's talk about it, you know?
Right.
And I think that played a really huge role in all of it, and knowing that we can have impact at different levels. I miss the club scene, honestly. I don't have time to do it now, but I have ideas or visions of getting back into it once I'm a little more settled in Durham and figuring some things out. But I think it's a healthy balance, and it allows you to find a healthy balance while still being around the game. Because we don't want to be around the game, right? I want to be around volleyball as much as possible.
Can you teeter in both worlds in volleyball?
You can, yeah. There's obviously some compliance issues, like not issues, but we have to be careful of. There's a radius rule where everyone on your team has to be within a certain radius, or their address has to be within a certain radius of the facility, and all these different aspects. But I think my end goal is getting on the boys' side of the club world, and continuing to grow, because it's one of the fastest growing sports in America right now.
Boys volleyball is.
Boys volleyball, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so, and I think finding that in North Carolina would be super cool. It's, I think, a few years away, because I need to, again, figure out, get my feet a little more settled, grounded as my routines with this job. But it's an environment where you can find a different way to love the game, and be around younger individuals that are figuring out what it means to love it, and figuring out who they are as volleyball players and who they are as people, being a part of that process. is really, really gratifying, I think. And so, yeah, as much as I can, I would love to start teetering between both again, because I miss it. I miss that environment. I miss being around it.
What's the hot spots for boys volleyball, like in the country?
Yeah, California is huge.
Yeah.
Um, the Midwest is pretty big. So like Chicago, Illinois, Ohio.
Yeah.
And
I had
then,
no idea. Because on like I have a lot of conversations with like college gymnastics coaches, and
mm,
then for them, the men's side is like the dying sport.
yeah,
So that's why I'm kind of fascinated that like it's just growing that much in
yeah,
y'all
it's
sport.
high school participation. There's every year there's in one or two states that sanction it as a
Hmm.
sport at the high school level. So we're seeing progression, we're seeing growth. I could plug so many things about boys
Yeah, yeah,
volleyball,
yeah.
but I just think it's a sport that is underappreciated because people haven't been exposed to it.
Totally.
So how can we get people exposed to it and see that it's different than women's volleyball in a good way, right? They're two different games, but they're both phenomenal to watch and phenomenal to really sit down and absorb kind of what's happening on the court, and the level of athleticism and the level of schematics, frankly, that people
Hmm.
are going through to win at that level is cool, I think, for us, because we see both the men's and the women's, and we can see the differences, and can we take bits and pieces from the men's side and bring it to ours. The men do the same with us, and just bouncing ideas and questions. But a sport that I think is the women's side is obviously taking off, like you see on the media landscape. Nebraska sold
Right.
90,000 tickets to a game, right? And viewership is through the roof. But I think the men's side is going to kind of catch that tailwind with it, and see where kind of it can go. Just piggybacking off of the women's side.
So is it small? Like I'm originally from Alabama. So is it small in the
Okay.
Southeast?
Very small.
Because
Uh,
I didn't realize. So originally from Alabama, and then 4 years ago, moved to Dallas.
okay.
And like when I got out there, that's when I like I was like, holy hell, like
Yeah, man.
holy hell.
Yeah.
Because again, it was an exposure thing. I was like, oh, volleyball, like yeah, like I saw people play it in high school, and like there were some clubs here and there, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
nothing crazy. Then I got out there and it was like volleyball and soccer clubs on like every corner.
Yeah. 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 Dallas is the mecca of club volleyball, I would say. Like
Oh, is
it's
it really?
yeah. A lot of I mean, the population's huge, right? So that
Yeah,
helps.
yeah, right.
But the level of talent across the board is wild when you think
Yeah,
about, you look at college rosters and you just see who's from just the Metroplex in general, is pretty crazy.
yeah. Do you want to get back to Texas?
I do. I
Yeah,
do. And I've been pretty open that the dream job is to be the head coach there. That's 20 years away. Like
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
in any kind of
Well, I
rush.
was gonna ask. I mean, I was gonna ask, like, what's the ultimate dream outcome? Because
Yeah.
I was curious of like, because you were there, and then I guess you just need to get exposure in different roles, is why you left ultimately to be able to have the experience.
Yeah. And I think the standard there is so high. I'm very young to be in the role that I'm in. And
How old are you?
I'm 25.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Just turned 25. And so the staff there, have been at that level for 20 plus years. Right. And so I'm not expecting to work there or to be given a shot there for a while, because
never
they,
know.
they have the fortune of hiring the best. Right.
Yeah,
And so I have to go prove that I belong in that realm. I belong in that world. But yeah, I think there's something special about working at your alma mater. Something
totally.
special about working at an institution that I frankly grew up in. I grew up on that campus more than I did probably in the classroom. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was the way
yeah.
childhood was. It was class was their school was over. I went to school blocks from campus growing up, and so I would just walk to my mom's office in the football stadium, and that
Damn
was
cool.
life. That was every day.
Yeah, yeah,
And so that's at the end of the day. I think I want that to be the last job that I have. Um, I have no idea what the path looks like to get there. I have
yeah.
general ideas of what I need to do or need to get done, but that's the end goal, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. A
Yeah.
little bit of speaking into existence, but also know that like I think I have a clear goal, and whatever I need to do to make that happen is going to be what I do.
Yeah, so I'm assuming kind of part of that piece too is to get head coaching experience at some
Yeah.
juncture. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that institution is, or that department as a whole, they don't hire head coaches that haven't been
Head
a
coach.
head coach before. And so, yeah, part of that progression is, go be a head coach somewhere, and win, frankly, like I have to win. Right. And
Yeah.
so, that's going to be probably the step before, that goal is realized. But it's part of it. And it definitely is part of it, to make sure I check that box and prove that I can run a program. And then, because, coaching at Texas is different. Being a head coach at Texas, any
Everything in Texas is damn
is
different.
different, man. And so, yeah, that's definitely part of the journey, though.
Yeah. So what's been I guess kind of twofold, because you talked about like why you're in it, and kind of surrounding yourself with those people and making sure that you're around those people to constantly remind you of like why you're in it. And you touched on like connections and relationships and things like that. And then you mentioned something earlier, and you talked about it, or you mentioned it in terms of with like the club age athletes and like finding out who they are in terms of like that's my language, like identity. Like to me, that is everything, because once you can answer that question, life becomes such a more solvable puzzle. But I think everybody's like looking for the magic fairy dust on like all these different paths or all these different
Yeah.
kind of shiny object syndromes a little bit without ever just knowing who the hell they are. So how have you, or do you, utilize that at the college level too?
Mhm.
Because I also, in my experience in the college teams like that I worked with, is like that's like the root of everything. Like you get in there and you just ask that question and they're just like, I'm Susie, I'm 20, I'm from Texas,
Yeah.
and I play volleyball. And they get really wild if they're like, I have a dog, right? Like, and that's about as
Yeah.
surface level as it gets. And so like, how have you kind of come in, taken that experience from those conversations with 14, 15, 16 year olds and helped develop 18, 19, 20 year olds in the same way?
Yeah. I think there's a lead kind of with a funny story or a funny gimmick that we do, but, our associate head coach, her name is Kelly, and, one of our graduating seniors would, when she was young and she was an underclassman, she would go up to Kelly and say, Coach Kelly, and Kelly would turn around and go, Player Lizzie. And so it created this dynamic of, you can call us by our first names, because we want you guys to realize we're all more than what we do kind of
Yeah.
every day. And I heard, I got a chance to listen to your episode with Kevin Hambley, and he talked about that, and that
Yeah.
really hit home of how can we convince them that they're more than what they do 3 to 4 hours a day. And so a big thing that we like to do is we create that conversation, recreate that space of, let's talk about non-volleyball things. Let's go do non-volleyball things, whether it's going to a museum together when we're on the road, whether it's, going to get dinner when we're on the road, and trying to get away, so we can have those conversations about life and about who we are, and what we want to do, and how we want to do it. Because it's easy to get wrapped up in it, right? It's easy
Yeah.
to know, hey, Monday through Saturday, we're waking up and we're going to practice and we're competing and we're doing X, Y, and Z. And as coaches, the same way, we're in the office from 8 to 7, right? And so how does that impact us, and how can we give ourselves, the space to have those conversations and allow everybody that's a part of our program to know that it's more than just what we contribute to the program. Like, we're also people. And so I think you asked about the conversations with club kids and how
Mm-hmm.
it can translate. I think honestly, it's all the same to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
In different phases, right? But, at the club level or the club age, they're figuring out, do they love this enough to really go get it, right? And the answer can be no, and I think it's okay for the answer to be no, and letting them know that it's okay for them to say, I don't love it the same way. And then
Well,
once they get to college,
not to cut you off, but it's so
no,
interesting
go.
too, because I think a lot of kids, especially in the way club sports is set up nowadays, is it's freaking crazy.
Mhm.
Just in all sports. And then I feel like what I know is so many kids have a sense of guilt if they don't go do it, because they're like, well, mom invested time,
Yeah,
energy, money, all the
yeah,
things. And it's like,
yeah,
I would not be able to go tell them that I don't want to go do this. I'm like, well, like if your mom loves you less because you don't want to go do that, then I need to have a conversation with your
Right.
mom. Like
Right.
that's a whole nother thing that you don't need to tackle.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating to get them to be like, hey, it's okay. Or it's okay to not want to go Power Five D1. Like you want the
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
to like just go play and have fun and enjoy the game. But there's just so much guilt, like I think built in. And I don't know, maybe you can tackle as a club coach of like, I'm sure you've dealt with some crazy ass parents in your day
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. And
um,
yeah.
helping them overcome that.
Yeah. And I think there's personal experience too. Like I had a sit down conversation with my parents junior year of high school when I was like, I don't want to play in college. Like it's just not the environment that I want to be in, or not. I don't have the opportunities that I want to pursue. And I asked them because of the financial aspect of club. I was like, can I still play my senior year? Like, can I finish this with my best friends? And it was funny, their reaction. I'll never forget it because it was, they thought I was silly. Like they thought I was
Right.
dumb for asking. They're like, we're already planning the trips. Like we already have the schedule. Like we already know what we're doing. Nationals is in Columbus. Like we're gonna go out with a bang. And so I was fortunate enough to have that dynamic with my parents. Like they understood, I think, or they allowed me to understand what that experience meant for me to go out with my best friends and finish playing the way I wanted to finish playing. And it's hard to have those conversations with 15, 16 year olds when the parents see it differently. And I think that's one of the good parts about being in the college side is you are having those conversations with the kid, because frankly, they need to be able to have those mature conversations. They're not easy and they're going to be awkward and funky at first, but I think allowing them to feel like they can have that voice themselves, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are you here? What are you doing and why are you doing it, kind of thing. And there's no right or wrong answer, or there's no wrong answer, right? It's always going to be the right answer because it's your answer.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's the differentiator. That's what separates those two worlds is you're not fighting, but you're balancing the parent's perspective because
Now
it
you
might
can say
very
you're fighting sometimes.
yeah, and it could be very different than their kids, and no
Yeah.
one really knows how to have that conversation. The college level, it's you're dealing with the student athlete themselves, and they might be talking to their parents. Their parents might want to be a part of the meetings, which is fine, but we have to hear from that young woman, and we have to
Yeah.
hear how she's feeling, and give her the space and the freedom to feel what she wants to feel and express that to us, or to one of us, or to a teammate. And so that's, I think, there's just so much more growth there because
Yeah.
it's them by themselves with their friends or with their teammates, figuring out what those conversations sound like and how to navigate them,
Yeah.
uh, because they are not easy.
Yeah. 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 All right. You can go back now. Tangent. On like utilizing those like conversations with identity from like club to college too.
Yeah, and it was a for me it was like the trial run being in club and having those conversations because you get to college and the pressure is greater, right? The expectations are higher,
Yeah.
and the crisis that some might go through from an identity standpoint is larger,
Yeah.
right? Because of the pressure and the stress and the expectation. And so I think it just goes back to giving them the space to feel and to talk and to figure it out. And so there's that balance between, hey, we have really high expectations for you. We're going to push you every day. We need to do this and know this, but also, how are you? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
does this mean to you? Like, do you love this still? And people are going to love it differently, right? And that's okay. Like figuring out how you love it is an important part of those conversations. And we had end of season meetings earlier this week or last week, I guess, at this point. And we went through all of them, and no one's going in the portal, right? And so, like, I think this in these days, that's a win, right? That's awesome.
You're right.
But there were some hard conversations, because the season was harder on some than on others, and uh, our the biggest joy we as a staff got out of it is that they not that they were upset or not that there were emotions, but that they felt comfortable in that space to feel and
Hmm.
express, because it means they're on that journey of figuring out who they are and what this experience means to them. And I think at the 15, 16-year-old level, you're not going to have those conversations. But
Yeah.
you can start figuring them out a little bit, on both ends as a coach and them themselves, because they're going to have those conversations if they play in college. And so I think club is a trial run for that part. specifically the identity part,
Yeah.
right? Club is figuring out, is this worth it? Like, do I want to be in this environment? Club, you're practicing 2 to 3 nights a week. You're traveling, once the season starts, every second or third weekend. And it's a lot on a 15, 16-year-old. But college is 20 hours a week, right? And you're traveling a lot more and a lot farther. And you're expected to do this while also getting a degree. And I think it allows them to figure it out and have those conversations, or think about those conversations of, is this it for me? Like, is this
Yeah.
the world I want to live in? And it's the same for us as coaches. Like, coaching club allows you to figure those things out. Like, do I want to commit to this? Like, is this the lifestyle I want? Are these the conversations I'm ready to have? Are these the expectations I want to be under? And so they definitely are connected. They're definitely, just, at least for me specifically, part of that process, part
Right.
of that figuring out how to navigate being a coach and with young women, and in this high expectation world of college athletics, especially at the Power Five level.
Yeah, I feel that too, that so many like they lack the direction going into college. And
Mhm.
so they almost go in with a misconceived perception of like what college athletics is going to be about. Because I can think of like the moment I was standing in front of a team, I'm like, what has everyone told you that college is supposed to be what? And they're like, the time of my life. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what's the number one emotion you feel on a day-to-day basis? And in asking that question for 3 years in every single team, I've yet to get, at least with female teams, I've yet to get a different answer than either stress or anxiety. I'm like, so
Yeah,
wait, on one hand, before you got here, everyone told you you're going to have a effing blast. And now
yeah,
all of a sudden, like you're scratching your head like, well, this kind of sucks. Like nobody prepared me, nobody told me for this. And so I feel like getting them to understand and navigate those waters of it can be the time of your life, but you also learn how to have to not control emotions, but manage them better. And I think that that's for them is such a key to having the experience that they actually like wanted to.
that they want to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, what's in your experience so far, at least at the college level, biggest struggle, biggest hurdle, between like coach and athlete?
Yeah, I think it's the communication piece,
Yeah,
whether it be in the gym or outside the gym. I think perception is reality, right? And so what we say, how we say it, not just for the sake of like protecting our job. Like, I hate hearing coaches talk about that personally, but um, it's good human behavior to think about how you're saying something to someone,
right.
and figuring out how it's going to impact them. And it's hard and it's taxing, um, but it's part of that relationship building piece that I think is so critical for what we do. But they're 18 to 22 years old, and they're going through who knows what, um, outside of volleyball or outside of school or in school.
Hmm.
We are passionate about what we do, and how that comes off is going to come out different ways. But I think it's, to me, it's the biggest struggle, but it's also the most rewarding process, of getting to a point where there's going to be misunderstanding, there's going to be miscommunication.
Yeah,
Can we, at the end of the day, like, look each other in the eye, have a 2-minute conversation, be like, we're good, like,
yeah,
I got you and you got me, and we're here for the right reasons, we're here for the same reasons. But I think, especially on a male to female level, like, I don't know, our oldest athlete this year was just turned 23, so she's just 2 years younger than I am.
yeah,
And when I was at Penn State, they were the same age. When I got hired at Duke, some of them were the same age as me. Um, and so there's a dynamic there that's different, that's
yeah. And it
navigate.
can be to your advantage too,
It
because a lot
can.
of times they can respect you and be more open-minded
Yeah.
because they kind of see you as the same
Yeah.
versus if a 50-year-old male comes in, it's like, bro, you
Yeah.
don't get me, man. Like
Yeah.
Instagram was not around when you were
Yeah.
here, right? Like
Yeah. We're talking about
did the
TikToks now.
telephone exist when you were
Yeah.
alive?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's, for me personally, like, a blessing and a curse, right? But I think that process is the most rewarding part of it, because then that relationship gets deeper. Like, you can be upfront about the miscommunication. You can be true to each other about, hey, this is what I thought and I did not like it, right? And it's like, oh crap, like, I'm sorry, like, that was not my intention. Or sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I wanted you to feel that. Like we have to have those conversations. But that's, I think, will always be the biggest hurdle, just in this profession in general, just because of that, the dynamics of what an 18 to 22-year-old, especially young woman, as a student athlete at this level, like I cannot relate in any way, right?
Right.
Figuring out what that means and how we have to communicate to each other is the biggest hurdle for sure, but also I think one of the biggest rewards once you get over it and figure out how to go through those things with each other.
Yeah, I think getting them to, communication's big. I think like my focus like right now is getting them, like, words matter, and a lot of times they use words, but they don't even it's not even the right context, right? Like I'm like, what's your definition of that? Or it's just a big buzzword. That's like, oh my, that infuriates me more in the college or just in sports world in general. It's like all like, well, I need you to be a better leader. Well, like, but like, what does that mean? Like I need to know, like, whether that's athlete to athlete, coach to coach, like whatever that is like, there has to be a definition like behind that. Or, I deal again a lot like within like the gymnastics world, and the big one, and it's a little bit sports too, is like confidence. And so I'm like, but what does that actually mean to you? And I'll sit in a room, I'm about here in a little bit to ask 5 or 6 down with 5 or 6 of them and ask them, and I'm going to get 5 or 6 different answers. And I'm like, but that's a problem. Like we all got to be on the same page and know it's like, hey, I need you to be more confident today. Like we know what that looks like. And so they just use, and it could probably be in the end of the season meeting. Like, what do I need to work on? Like my confidence. Like, I don't know what, like, help me understand what that actually looks like for you.
Yeah.
So that's
for you. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think too is, and again, I think this is where I like, you could have a lot of benefit too, because I think within communication is like most of those kids, number one thing is like, they just want to feel understood. And being closer to their age and certain stories, just because of age and life experience, allows you to allow them to feel understood. I always say is, even like if I go in with the team, I'm like, I watch so many people make this mistake in kind of like my industries. They go in and they're like, this is how great I am, and I've helped this team, and I'm with this team, and I was this team, and they're like, and then I was an athlete, and this is what I accomplished. And they're like, bro, you were an athlete in like 2006. Nobody gives a shit, right? Like it's almost, it's not relatable like in their brains. And so it's like, I always just go, I'm like, this is how I sucked. Like this is, and just be vulnerable, to be able to kind of like, oh, okay, like I feel understood. Oh, he felt stressed too. Like now I feel understood, and telling them, like when you were there and you felt stress and like all the things.
Yeah. And I think that a big part of what we do too is about acknowledging the hard for them.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, hey, like what we're asking of you guys is not easy.
Right.
And we get that. We understand that. How can we still navigate this? How can we still go be successful? How can we still go achieve what we want to achieve? But like up front, it's like, hey, we get this is hard.
Yeah.
Like you have to know that we get it. We're not just thinking that you guys should walk in and be great right away. Like it's
right.
We understand that that's not reality, right? But allowing them to know that we see that, whether or not we went through it, like that we see that and we understand it. And so then can we then be more open with each other, more vulnerable, and know that, hey, we all get it's hard. Everybody's having a hard time sometimes. But we still have to do a job. We still have to go what we signed up for. We have to do what we signed up for, essentially.
And it's that I think the best coaches, because it is about winning too, right? So it like being able to like, it's like being able to find that balance. Because I like sometimes is like, I feel like athletes like, oh, like that's all they talk about. And I'm like, but like you do want to win. I think that's why you're here. Like nobody wants to go like 0-20. Like I don't think that I don't think that that's why you showed up and came here. So yeah, I think being able to talk about winning, but also talk about them at the same time. Yeah.
100%.
Last question. Okay, so same question for everybody. I didn't pre-frame you with this one. So if you were in the stadium or a stadium with 100,000 people, and you could only deliver one message, what would your core message be to those people?
Open-ended, like it environment. It's just 100,000 people
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
watching.
yeah. What would your central message be for them?
I think it'd be, yeah, I think it'd be about relationships, and I think it'd be like hey, look to the person to your right, or if you know that person, look to their right,
Mm-hmm.
and look them in the eye, introduce yourself, and find common ground.
Mm,
Um, I think the environment that we're in, the environment that our student athletes are in, more so the student athletes, is unlike. I like to say that being a student athlete, there's no other experience that an 18 to 22-year-old in the world goes through that they do.
yeah,
And it's because of the relationship that they're able to build through the stress, through the hard, through the good, through the through the success, through the failure. And we're fortunate enough to have that. How can we share the impact that can have on different worlds or different environments? And knowing that you don't necessarily have to be a student athlete or a coach to have great relationships, but we're fortunate enough that they're almost forced on us, right? Like we have to
yeah,
be around these people 8 hours a day for 6 days a week. It allows us to be in that environment. But, I think if I get a chance to be in that situation, it's about how can you build a relationship with someone? And you don't need to text them every day. You don't need to call them every day.
right.
Right. But relationships are different for everybody. But like, what does that look like for you? How can you look someone in the eye and know like, hey, we're both humans, how are you doing?
Yeah,
And I think to me, it's always about relationships day in, day out. And coaching, not coaching, working, unemployed, it's going to be the relationships that, not only get you through, but that kind of keep you going sort of thing. And if you don't have those or you don't lean into those and invest in those, it's going to be really hard. One, in our profession, but two, I think my belief is in life,
yeah, I agree.
navigating if you don't look at it that way.
Yeah, it's funny talking about with relationships. I was just having a conversation with an athlete yesterday, and it was like the three categories of relationships. I was like, you always have people below you so that you can guide them and be the mentor for them to pull them up, right? Because when you're a teacher and you're a guide, that's when you learn really best. You have people at the same level as you because that keeps you motivated and inspired to be able to accomplish the things you want to do. And then you have people above you in the sense of people that are pulling you up along the way that
Yeah.
you look up
I'll
to
look
and
out.
help
Yeah.
you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, cool, man. I won't take up all your day.
It's
I know
so
you
true
got to
too.
get rocking and rolling.
And it's simple. Like it can be that simple sometimes.
Yeah, really. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, well, simple wins. I think as same conversation actually is most, especially kids, they think complexity is better for whatever reason, right? It's like we attach, um, like if we look at a price tag of something all the time, we attach with a higher number that it must be more valuable. And I think, you know, young adults, 18, 19, 20 years old are constantly they're attaching complexity with better versus simple wins, simple
Yeah.
wins. So,
Simple wins, man.
well,
Yeah.
cool. Again,
Score
yeah.
more points than the other team. That's all.
Literally, literally, right? Well, I appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out. I'll keep following your journey. And for anybody else out there, again, the whole purpose of this is, just to be able to have conversations. Truly believe like stories are like what move people and to share different stories to be able to implement one thing into your own life. And I'll let you have the last word, man. Anything else you want to say?
Uh, just appreciate you, man. I think having these conversations is important. And making sure that people know that there's a human side to what we do, especially college coaching. Because I think, we can lose touch with that sometimes, but having these conversations is important and making sure people have a chance to listen to them and then have them themselves, learn what it means to have a hard conversation or an honest conversation about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And if you don't know, that's okay, but let's talk about it.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I love it. Awesome, guys. Until next time.